Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video and hope you guys are doing well. Today, I want to talk to you in this video around healing in Cata. So we've just done a video talking about tanking in Cata, the differences and all that sort of good stuff. And I want to do the same again this time with healing in Cata. I think personally, I'm not the most experienced healer in the world, but I've invited someone along. So Scottejaye, you probably all know him anyway. He's going to talk to his experiences in healing as well, which is a lot more than mine. But basically, talking of the differences between Cata and Wrath. Overall, personally, I think Cata has a lot more in every healer's toolkit. I mean, Dis gets a complete rework, Holy gets new chakras, Resto Shaman, Resto Druid get ground effects, Healing Rain and Efflorescence. Holy Pally gets like a complete new mechanic in Holy Power. There's a lot of changes, and I genuinely think it's quite interesting just the differences between them. So I'm going to pause the video, set everything up, and be back in a second. Hello.
Hello there.
So
that was my best Obi-Wan impression.
Perfect.
Sorry, carry on.
I was just bigging you up for how great of a healer you are and how you've basically carried us all through Cata.
It's great, isn't it, when you can just lie on videos and no one knows whether it's true or not. Thanks for that.
I've got footage of you healing. I mean, carrying is probably a different thing altogether, but certainly healing. I wanted to talk a little bit, like I said, healing in Cata compared to Wrath and the differences, what you prefer more and all that sort of stuff. But, I mean, you've played every healer in Cata, pretty much. I mean, we've kind of just talked about this, but you've played every healer in Cata, some more than others. Which one do you prefer, Cata healing or Wrath healing? Which is your tipple?
I say again because we have spoke about this obviously in take one. I prefer Cata overall. Like, you know, if I had to pick one, I prefer Cata healing because I feel like it's more methodical. You're having to think far more in advance of the heal that you're doing there and then, if that makes sense. Whereas, like, you know, playing a Holy Paladin in Wrath, it's literally just whack-a-mole. Just every time someone's health moves, press Holy Light. And don't stop casting Holy Light because mana is just not an issue either. And that would apply to all of the healers except for Resto Druid, which, is just the one where, I'll be honest with you, I don't care whether I'm healing as a Resto Druid in Cata or Wrath. I just don't. They are different. And obviously, as the conversation goes on, we probably will cover exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. But ultimately, you're a hot class, aren't you? You know, you're putting hots on people. It doesn't matter whether that's Life Bloom or that's Rejuve or that's, Wild Growth. It feels the same. You know, it's probably the one that feels the most similar from Wrath to Cata. But I'd say Cata. Yeah, long story short,
I can definitely agree with that. I mean, Resto Druid is a blanket healer no matter which expansion you put them in, basically, isn't it?
Exactly. 100%.
So, I mean, to give context, we have just recorded this and I screwed up the recording, but we won't talk too much about that. So going back into the next question, which one do you think is harder? So I mentioned that I believe that Wrath healing is actually harder than Cata, in my opinion. And I'm not sure if that's just short attention span, but I definitely prefer Cata healing and think it's less of a challenge personally. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think Cata healing is harder just because you can't go balls to the wall and, just cast loads and loads of big heals and know that you're going to be all right by the end of the fight. Because, like, if we was to just use Nefarian as an example, just normal Nefarian, which, for those of you that don't know, last boss in Blackwing Descent, it's quite a long fight. And if you're going in there in sort of your heroic dungeon gear and maybe a couple of bits from reputations or something like that, like, mana is a challenge. Like, you can easily run out, especially when, the entire raid is getting smacked for like 40%, 50% of their health on like every 10% the boss loses its health, you will take a massive blast. Whereas in Wrath, it's you've got so many things to fall back on. Me as a Holy Paladin, let's say I'm just like spamming out Holy Light constantly. I'm not in melee range of the boss, so I'm not getting mana back. I can just get Innovates, and Innovate literally fills my mana bar up. We've not got that crutch in Cata, where it's like you can't just use all your mana and go, quick, give me an Innovate, because the Innovate's going to do literally next to nothing. So I think from a mana perspective, I would say Cata's more difficult. You do have to, like I said at the start, be more methodical, really think about how you're spending your mana. And the other thing is, none of your heals are that big. In Wrath, I can do one holy light on someone that's on 10% health, and it will, they'll be on 100%. It will fill their entire health bar up. In Cata, there is no heals like that. Even Divine Light, it might do 20, 25% of someone's health. Or, if it crit, let's say 40, 45, something like that. But you haven't got that ability to top people off really, really fast. So you're always trying to keep on top of raid healing, with small heals often rather than big heals, if you know what I mean.
What's really interesting is that, like, the two things you've mentioned there are probably the two reasons why I like Resto Shaman. So their mastery is bigger heals on low health, so they have got that ability to top someone off on low health. And like Nefarian is the example that you've used. I finished that fight on 100% mana as a Resto Shaman in heroic dungeon gear, because the build that you run for a lot of these bosses is, well, you have no mana issues. So I suppose this is why I wanted the other opinion, because from Resto Shaman, both of those aren't issues in Cata, whereas in Wrath they definitely are. You can't just sit and chain heal spam for the entire fight in Wrath, because you will go home very quickly. So it's definitely interesting. So
and it's the same with the others, though. As a holy paladin, well, you've seen, I end fights on 100% mana, and the other healers are literally completely But I can't just stand and spam, the same spell over and over again like I do in Wrath. I feel like I have to put a lot more thought into Cata healing, which is why I prefer it. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier.
Okay, so talking a little bit more specifically towards dungeon healing, and I'm going to say it kind of during like early weeks of Cata, when you're going through dungeons, you're not full geared, you're not best in slot, you're not full raid gear, anything like that. What would you compare kind of dungeon healing in Cata compared to Wrath in a similar scenario in Wrath, when you're going through doing kind of early heroics or gammas and alphas as they are now?
I'd say Cata is just a million times harder for a healer. Like, I wouldn't even say there's any competition, and especially when you're going to have like groups of people that don't know what they're doing. So just use Stone Core Trash as an example. You're going to have casts going off where they turn into a big elemental and start spinning round. You're going to be tested as a healer in Cata. Whereas, let's face it, in Wrath, you don't even need gear. You don't really need gear to heal the dungeons. Whereas heroics, every healer that I've leveled and geared up and done the actual heroic grind, and not just bought all the gear and gone straight into raids, it can be quite challenging early on. Even the paladin was quite challenging early on. Not like all the time. It is just that mana battle and people making mistakes. If you've got a group of like 5 of us, me, you, and a few of the lads that we've played on these servers with, we could probably do it in full green quest gear and be able to clear heroics. But that's because the understanding's there, do you know what I mean, of the actual mechanics.
Yeah, so I've mentioned kind of earlier in the video how I think it's in Cata you're much more punished for failing a mechanic. And I think as a healer, it's a lot harder to kind of brute force and carry that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, you're like, if somebody makes a mistake, you're the one that's then, as the healer, you're the one that's got to pick the slack up, aren't you? And like I said, it's so hard to, like, once you get behind on healing, it can be hard to catch up without then just dumping a full mana bar into everyone to try and get them up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the moments I remember from kind of early Cata was healing Halls of Origination. And kind of some of the bosses in there where they were a little bit untuned and things like that, and you just literally burning 100% of your mana in 30 seconds just trying to keep people alive. Pulling ridiculous numbers, but yeah. Obviously then dungeons are going to be a little bit harder and potentially a lot more punishing, a lot more reliant on good healers for throughput. Let's talk about raid healing then. So more so specifically kind of tier 11, let's talk about how it is going to be as we go into Cata. What's your thoughts compare tier 11 to ICC? It's a completely different kettle of fish, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's, there are actually, like Chimeran, for example, that's a fight that people don't actually realise is a healer fight, because most of the time people do it wrong. You've got fights where your healers make a big difference. Chimeran, Nefarian, 100%. even Halfus to a certain extent, where we've seen having a Disc Priest on that fight in particular makes a big difference. In terms of raid healing, though, I mean, in tier 11, there's not really that many fights that are massive amounts of raid healing. There's a lot of spot healing, but like actual just like raw, where everybody's taking damage, there's not that many fights like that, I would say.
I mean, but
would you?
I'd say, I mean, when I say raid healing, you mean more healing raids than kind of healing a raid as the whole people. As like 10 people
okay, yeah, just generally, yeah, healing in raids. Sorry, I thought you meant actually, topping groups of people off.
No, yeah. So more kind of like I said, the difficulty when you literally just take the bosses in ICC compared to the bosses in tier 11. I think it's a whole different kettle of fish because there's some fights that like you've mentioned, Chimeron. I mean, one that I've looked at today actually is Magmor Heroic, which turns from a really, really simple, easy to heal fight into complete carnage on Heroic, a really tight healer check.
Yeah.
I don't think there's as many healer checks in ICC, certainly, as there is in Tier 11.
No, definitely not. ICC, yeah, I think, I know we're only like, what, week, is this reset 3 now in ICC? But I think it's been quite underwhelming, to be honest with you, especially from a healing perspective. It's not difficult at all. And I don't know if that's just the way we play now, but, even I was like, oh, God, 0% buff. Like, that this is going to be pretty rough. And then you're going in and one-shotting them all, and you're like, oh, all right, maybe not. Whereas I don't see that happening in Blackwing Descent and Bastion of Twilight. And I've been editing a video today actually where I've been talking about problems in Cata, which will be out soon. And one of the things that I was actually talking about was the difference in how the raids stay relevant. Like even during Firelands, you'll still be doing Bastion of Twilight and Blackwing Descent. The same way during TOC, we was doing Alduar. But, this doesn't need item levels playing with or anything like that. You'll do it anyway because there's still big trinkets. There's still, and the item level difference is not massive. But in terms of actually healing them, I would say Bastion of Twilight is actually probably very easy. I don't think Bastion of Twilight's that difficult at all. I'd say Blackwing Descent's the harder one out of the initial raids. Yeah, just from a healing perspective. I think there's a lot more spot damage that needs to be healed.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing healers try and do Alakir Heroic. It was during initial original progression, that was the healer check. That was the fight that made or break your healers. Because it's a tight enrage check, so it's not like you can just go, oh, we'll throw another healer at this. Think like Syndragosa in ICC. Even on Heroic, we go, we'll just throw another healer if we need that extra throughput. If the boss dies an extra 30 seconds later, it doesn't matter. Whereas Alakir's a really, really tight enrage check, and then you've got mass raid healing.
You've got. I didn't actually think about that. In all fairness, in terms of actual, when I was talking about general raid healing before, that where you're actually stacking in the first phase, and then even the second phase, the actual sort of air phase, if you want to call it that, is awful as well, just purely because of range and needing people to stay near you. It's a horrible fight to heal overall.
God. So my final kind of big question then, and I mean, there's loads that's added in Cata in terms of different classes utility. I know that one that I've seen you make great use of is the Holy Pally having an interrupt. I mean, you've mentioned it a lot of times, how you're the only person interrupting in dungeons and raids and things. Is there anything that
I like to show off?
Yeah, is there anything you kind of really, really do or really don't like about Cata healing? And is there anything you'd like to potentially see change going into Cata? Obviously, Blizzard have talked that there is the potential of changes. Is there anything that kind of major issues or major kind of positives?
Well, when you say major issues, I major positives. I love the fact that all hybrid classes got an interrupt. So being able to be a holy paladin who's already up in melee anyway, getting mana back, and obviously getting holy power from using Judgment Strike, Crusader Strike. Sorry, so you're already there. So having the ability to be put on interrupt rotations, is just so valuable, especially in 10-mans where you're already limited on the amount of people you can bring anyway. Disc Priest. The one gripe I've got with it. So I love Disc, and I'm 100% going to be playing a Disc Priest as an alt in Cata. Is Atonement. Like, I love Atonement. It's great, but I don't like. I feel like its potential is actually quite limited by the fact that it's only got a 15-yard range.
Yeah,
So
100%.
you can only really use it effectively if either everybody is stacked or otherwise you're just healing the melee. Which, don't get me wrong, it is quite overpowered. Atonement in general is very, very good, and I really enjoy it. But selfishly, if there could be a change, having that put up to 30 yards, I think would be quite nice.
Yeah, I mean,
I just forget about the range. I let them die because I'm like, well, I'm not stopping spamming smite. So if you don't move within 15 yards of the boss, that's your problem.
yeah, I mean, Disc is kind of the worst healer for me to see as a Resto Shami in Cata because, well, we do the same thing. They just do it with a lot more damage. Like, my whole thing in Cata is I'm going to put healing rains on the floor and you stand in it or you die. Whereas a Disc is I'm going to do Atonement, and if you don't stand in 15 yards, you're probably going to die also.
Yeah, and that's like quite the annoying thing when you actually think about all the classes. So, like in terms of how they get punished. Now, obviously, you've seen me heal on a Resto Druid. Like I really enjoy healing as a Resto Druid, and I find it quite overpowered. Actually, most of the time, I feel more powerful on a Resto Druid than I do a Holy Paladin. Actually, in Cata, but like a Holy Paladin needs everyone stacked. To be able to Light of Dawn effectively and Holy Radiance. A Shaman, you need people to stand in your healing rain, like simple as that. As a priest, you've got that range sort of stipulation on atonement healing. Spamming shields, whilst yes, you absolutely could do it, I don't think it's going to be the go-to healing style. I do think everyone's just going to be like an atonement build because it is that good. Whereas Resto Druid, obviously they get efflorescence or whatever it's called, the green healing circle on the floor. That's kind of just a bonus. Yes, you want people to stand in it because it's extra healing, but like Resto Druid genuinely is the only healing class really that is not restricted by people being spread. Like people can stand where they want and do what they want, and it's just not punishing, and that's what I find frustrating when I'm on the Holy Paladin, and it's like, why are the ranged all, why are you spread? Like, well, I'm always calling for people to stack when we're raiding in Cata because it's like, there is no need to spread. If if we can get away with stacking, it helps. Yeah, the Resto Shamans, Holy Paladins, Disc Priests, like everyone, apart from Resto Druid, which is quite interesting when you think about it, because I actually do see Resto Druid being quite going from how they are now with like one being used in most raids in ICC to I in a 25 man, I'd take 2 or 3 Resto Druids in Cata.
Well, I mean, we've talked about how kind of Disc Priest Resto Druids, I mean, we ran that during Firelands, and it was incredibly effective. Tanks kind of just looked after themselves with a bit of atonement help, and Resto Druid just kind of blanket healed the raid. And then on the fights where stacking was allowed, think like Major Domo, think how many stacks we used to cover on Major Domo with like Resto Druid, Trank, Tree, all that sort of stuff. Innovate actually being worthwhile on a tree. And Disc Priest then obviously having everything they can bring as well.
Yeah. I mean, normally we weren't even doing the first spread till the boss was on about, I don't know, 60%, maybe even lower than that. Yeah, well, it's bonkers. I feel like there's, because of the changes to Beacon, like, don't get me wrong, I love Holy Paladin still. I'll definitely be playing like Holy off spec at least in Cata, but they're not quite as relied upon for tank healing in Cata as they are in Wrath, even though they're still the strongest tank healers. But it's not as needed. Like, I'm trying to think of fights where you've even got 2 tanks that are taking damage at the same time. Nefarian and Onyxia when they're both up, yeah, but obviously we do that slightly different and just one tank it anyway. What was I up to? So where did you stop recording?
I've just had to pause it to load up some more footage because you talked for England. Yeah, but I mean, talking about like fights with 2 tanks and 2 tanks taking damage, it's very rare in Cata, in fairness. And I mean, like I said, Nefarian's probably one of them. Chimeron, maybe. I mean, you could kind of count it. Yeah, there's actually very few fights where you get anything like Blood Queen, where it's actually 2 tanks taking damage at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose Armortron as well. You've always got two, a tank on one and a tank on the other. But like the tank damage is just not massively high, is it? Like in general, it's not like tanks are getting slapped like they do, on Lich King, where they're like losing 80% of their health in a swing. Tank damage is not quite the same in Cata, and a lot of tanks, well, especially a Blood DK, they're more or less self-sufficient.
Yeah,
it's like they'll need a few hots, bit of atonement healing, like you said earlier, but. So I feel like Holy Paladin actually loses its value because of how strong the tanks are in Cata.
Definitely. I mean, I've done kind of this sort of video, but for tanking, where I've done a lot more tanking in Cata, and yeah, I mean, you're less likely to see a tank die to like sheer numbers in Cata than you are in Wrath, I think. I mean, look at doing Lich King 25 heroic progression. We're seeing the DK tank with 6k gear score week 1, week 2 get absolutely chunked down to like sub 5%. And if you don't have a Holy Pally just focusing that damage, you're just never going to be able to keep up with that. Whereas in Cata, I think, I mean, let's using Shanox as an example, which is a very, very heavy tank damage fight, especially when stacks ramp up. And we killed it without a tank swap originally. Like our first heroic Shanox kill, we didn't even tank swap. And he out-healed literally both other healers because of the ludicrous amount of healing they're capable of doing.
So I feel like it does lose. Don't get me wrong, Holy Paladin's still strong. I don't want anyone watching this thinking, you're not going to see Holy Paladins, because they're still strong. And, stacked AoE healing is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. With like Radiance and Light of Dawn, you can really put out incredible numbers as a Holy Paladin. But I'd just say you've got to brace yourself for a slightly different approach to healing. Yes, you are still healing tanks, of course, but you're more of a general raid healer now. That you let Beacon just look after the tank, and that's it.
Yeah. So, kind of final kind of question then, I suppose, and it's a little bit of a two-parter. What would be your ideal healing comp for 10-man, and then the same for 25-man?
So, for 10, I feel like you can make any of them work in 10-man. Like I think Holy Paladin, Disc Priest together is going to be strong. I think basically pair anything with a Holy Paladin, and it's going to work. But like I was just saying, I don't feel like you need the Holy Paladin. Like you don't need it purely for healing. It's more about everything else that the Paladin brings with like AM and blessings, auras. Like the utility of a Paladin, hand of protection, all that stuff.
Yeah,
which is what makes a Paladin strong. It's not actually just about raw numbers. I probably would. I would say for an overall like really solid 10-man comp, I probably would still run Holy Paladin, Disc Priest, I think.
So
or Holy Paladin, Resto Druid.
Just to jump in then, because it's one spec that neither of us have mentioned so far, is Holy Priest, who kind of has the ability to do a little bit of everything but nothing well.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. Like a Holy Priest in 25-man, for circular healing, and obviously with chakras and putting the AoE healing sanctuary, I think it's called, on the floor. There's they can be strong. I'm sure we will see some very good Holy Priests, and I actually like the way Holy Priest plays in Cata. But I feel like I said the same thing about Wrath. I was like, people are going to sleep on Holy Priest, and basically they have, and barely anyone plays Holy Priest because Disc is just better.
Yeah, 100%. Although, like, the more I think about it, I like Holy Priest purely for Guardian Spirit, and having that on a 1-minute cooldown is such a kind of fight-changing cooldown that just isn't used.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, obviously, let's then talk about 25-man. Is there any going to be... We've seen it in DPS where people are class stacking ludicrous amounts of whatever currently is the meta. Are we going to see anything similar for healers?
I think you'll see a good balance. Yeah, like quite honestly, I would just take one of each. I would say, as in run 4 healers, or if you need a 5th, then add whatever 5th in there you want. But, having a Holy Paladin, a Disc Priest, a Resto Shaman, and a Resto Druid as your core 4 healers in a 25-man, you can't really go wrong, can you?
No, absolutely.
You're just getting everything. So I do think, like, you're not going to want more than one disc priest. Like even though there's no, it's not like Wrath where you've got one that's bubbling everyone and then the other one's just stood there doing nothing, or you have set groups each that you're bubbling or whatever, because that's just not how disc plays. Obviously in Cata, so there's no harm in having two disc priests. But I just don't feel like it's going to bring. It's not going to bring as much as if you put a second Resto Druid in or a second Resto Shaman for another healing rain. Being able to stack all those ground healing effects, just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a second Spirit Link, I think, is going to be seen in some of the harder to heal fights, especially early on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I had. I mean, is there anything else healer-wise that you can think of that the people need to know?
No, not really. I mean, again, it's a shame about Holy Priest. Like I do think they'll be underutilized. I think this priest and Holy Paladin you're going to see a lot of, just because there's a lot of them now.
Yeah.
But Resto Druids, I can't stress enough how ludicrously strong Resto Druids are. Not even just their sheer output, but like mana is almost endless once you've got some spirit, and you've got some half decent gear. You don't even need to think about your mana bar, and yeah, just general throughput is really good. I think healing is going to be you're going to really see the difference between a good and a bad healer, which is what I don't think you really see in Wrath. If you've got a Holy Paladin and they're just never stopping to spam Holy Light, then odds are they're probably doing all right. Whereas I think you're going to see healers going in and spamming Flash of Light to try and top people off quickly and then being in like 5 casts.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be pretty rough. And it's a big change. And you got to remember, like, when we're in the pre-patch, you're going to be level 80. So all of your stats are going to be inflated from gear, and obviously the conversion rate. So I think during the pre-patch, you're going to have everyone stacked in gear thinking that, oh, this is easy. Like, I can spam as much as I want. And then by the time they get to 85, it's going to be like learning how to play your class all over again.
Yeah, I mean, that jump from 80 to 81, you almost lose stats because of kind of the gear difference and everything else. So, like, the first dungeons, I remember going into kind of Blackrock Descent and kind of healers and tanks just walking in and getting clapped because, like I said, things change and they're not set up already for it. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I don't think healers are in as bad spot as some of the DPS, and I think tanks are going to see things change a little bit. A lot for the positive, though. But yeah, so much appreciated for you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
But potentially do some more stuff in the future. I'm glad we finally got a video together.
It's only taken about 6 months. It's fine. So I'll speak to you again in 6 months' time.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds great. Maybe Cata will be out.
yeah, it probably will be. But no, I do just the last point is if you enjoy healing in Wrath, I think you'll enjoy healing in Cata.
Yeah,
that's it really.
I've said the same about tanking. I think if you enjoy it, tanking in Wrath, tanking in Cata is kind of the same, just more damage numbers basically.
Yeah, and you just feel more godlike.
So I'm going to just sign off, and good to speak to you, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
So to give some context, I've known Scott a long time and we've talked about doing a video together forever. So really great to have him on here. I think his insights into the healing stuff, it was a little bit of a longer video. Let me know if you like that, actually. I mean, we can do more of these. I can reach out to other people for interviews and talk about different topics. If this is the sort of thing that you like, let me know in the comments. But yeah, I mean, overall, great video. Thoroughly enjoyed having him on, and I think a lot of his insights were really great, and there was definitely things that I wouldn't have thought about, and hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more information as well. So if this is what you like, if this is the sort of video that you're looking for, make sure you sub, all that sort of stuff. I ain't going to go on. You know what I'm on about. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you later. Bye.